Did you really think this was gonna be a Five Nights at Freddy's video? You've played right into my trap. I'm only here to talk about Persona, and you've just made yourself my unwilling participant. This is a gift, really. A gift for all Persona YouTubers to rejoice in. I will make you all proud. Now sit back and enjoy.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry, Brendan, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to watch a Persona video, nor have you been called here by Persona YouTubers. However, you have indeed been called. You've all been called here, into a premiere of mishandled AIs and broken gameplay mechanics, a premiere with no end, a game with no pleasure. And yet, you don't even realize you've been scammed out of $40. Your need for Five Nights at Freddy's has put you in endless anguish, chasing a good game, always seeming so close, yet somehow out of reach. You will never have it. None of you will. This is where Five Nights at Freddy's ends. And to you, my valiant volunteer, who gathered all these people doing something not meant for you, I initially had a way planned out for you, but somehow I feel as though you don't want this to end. I am here as well. I am nearby. This series will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that created this can finally go away, as the fading of every game series should. And to you FNaF fans trapped on this video, be still and give up your hopes for a good game. They're way out of reach. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps warmth waiting for you once the smoke clears. Although, for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, homophobe. This ends for all of us. End of communication.
Whew, is it hot in here or is it just me? While I slowly burned to death along with every FNaF fan that wanted Security Breach to be good, I figured I'd talk about what led us to this moment of pain, agony, and slight erotica. Before Freddy Fazbear was popular enough to be throwing lobs at Le Bum, he was nothing more than an evil animatronic trying to kill a poor security guard who smelled a little. This was back in August of 2014, 8 years before the inevitable rise and collapse of one of the most beloved horror franchises of the decade. Oh, wait, I forgot about the intro bit. Hold on, I got something. There's no way a game about Chuck E. Cheese knockoffs could become an intricate story that garnered the attention of millions of people, right? Right, guys? Ah, crap. Let's go back a bit. No, not that far. There we go. Plenty of games held the horror title before the 1990s, but most didn't have much to offer in what people defined as horror. Remember, Friday the 13th was released in 1980, Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984, and Halloween literally came out in the late 70s. People knew what horror looked like before the gaming industry. But in March of 1996, video game fans across the globe got to finally witness the gaming industry's attempt at a true-to-form horror game with the title Resident Evil. Raise your hand if you've heard this one before. Most of you don't live under a rock, or Arizona most likely, so you know how successful Resident Evil was both as a game and as a franchise in the horror genre. Here's some food for your brain. The entire Resident Evil franchise has sold over 125 million copies over its tenure, just under The Legend of Zelda at 126 million, and above the Star Wars games, NBA 2K.
Yo, my nigga, you missed that? I swear to God! You are trash! You're worse than a fucking female dog! Oh my gosh, you dumb bitch!
and Wii Sports. But we're not here to talk about Resident Evil, as it's a survival horror game, which, while Steam may say so, curse you inaccurate game tags! Five Nights at Freddy's is not a survival horror game like Resident Evil, not even close. I mentioned the Residents of Evil because it inspired a game that culminated in creating a new type of horror. Raise your hand if you've heard this one before. In January of 1999, just about 30 days into the new year, Silent Hill, a game in which you play as an everyman wandering through a Sin City looking for your daughter, hit the scene hard. Silent Hill is widely credited with the creation of psychological horror, similar to survival horror, but with less emphasis on management and more emphasis on reaction and emotional distress. Silent Hill is also extraordinarily influential to the current horror game genre, except now we're in the same league as Mr. Fazballs over here. Many games have since followed in Silent Hill's footsteps and created lasting trauma and skid marks on the underwear of boys across the planet. One of those games is Five Nights at Freddy's. In early August of 2014, a man named Scott Cawthon released an indie game named Five Nights at Freddy's on Steam. Homophobe. The game made waves for being different from most other horror games at the time, giving us the iconic Markiplier video title, Warning, Scariest Game in Years. And he was right. Droves of content creators were doing everything in their power to both get the heebie-jeebies scared out of them and find out what this game truly is. In my Halloween special about the first FNaF game, I discussed the majority of this game's success, so I'm just gonna give you guys cliff notes for now. If you want to see more, click on the annotation in the upper right-hand corner to see that video. Very basically, maybe even oversimplified, FNaF was a generational advancement in horror and helped pioneer both the new gold standard in horror and the use of YouTube and social media to promote a video game over, being good. Not to say that FNaF wasn't good, just that many games after it weren't. But what happened in the horror industry before FNaF and many other indie horror titles that mandated this new wave of horror in video games? I feel like I'm saying horror a lot. Horror. I sound like a Bostonian. In order to understand the effect FNaF had on the horror genre post-2014, we have to go back to the early 2000s. Shortly after the success of Resident Evil 4, arguably the most religiously fetishized Resident Evil game of all time, some of you guys really need to go touch grass. And that's coming from a Persona fan. Many of the companies that had horror franchises under their belt decided to step away from the horror genre in favor of a new, innovative experience with more ways to hook potential customers and make millions on top of billions of dollars. Action. The de-terrorization of these titles made for an absolutely batshit period of jumping off of helicopters, bird's eye view video games, Call of Duty-esque controls and visuals, ammo on top of ammo on top of ammo, sexy female characters with cleavage that would put porn stars to shame, and a regular-sized man with bulging muscles punching a boulder. Yeah, this was one hell of a time to be alive. For most of the 2000s, horror as a genre didn't really seem like much of a moneymaker, and the sale of some of these new action-oriented titles would seem to agree with that sentiment. That was until a lore-filled, psychological horror indie video game was released and showed just about everyone that the notion of horror games being non-money makers was bullshit. And that video game was Slender Man. That's right, it was Slender Man that started the idea of horror making a comeback. FNaF would, of course, popularize this idea and expand upon it, but we know who the real father of horror is, right, Slender Man? You know what, I'm just gonna walk away from you. So now that we know just how big of a deal FNaF was for horror back in 2014 and seeing its success blossom, selling over 1 million copies to date, was there any way Scott could replicate the success of the first game without running into the usually terrible sequel trope that's plagued franchises before? Well, yes, he could actually, and he did it in the same year.
She is such a bad bitch though. I will fuck the shit out of that robot, man. I'm not even...
A mere 3 fucking months after the release of the first game. I'm not kidding. FNAF 2 dropped in November of 2014. Scott decided that not only was he going to make the fans proud, but he was gonna do it in record fucking time. I still can't fathom how in Neptune's name this guy did that shit in like 5 minutes. FNAF 2, the sequel to the first Five Nights at Freddy's installment, opened to astonishing success and fanfare, garnering seemingly more attention than its predecessor. The roots of this attention are in the unfinished story that the first game barely told while you were fighting for your life against the 5 deadliest Chuck E. Cheese rejects in the world. And while telling you somewhat more of the story, it comes with a price of even more fucking animatronics trying to kill you in an even more open yet claustrophobia-inducing space. If you're wondering what Markiplier titled this game, scariest game ever made. The game further expanded on the death of the children that were later stuffed into... Actually, is it canon that the little kids were stuffed into the animatronics by William Afton? Or is that speculatory? God, I can't fucking keep up with this shit. There were a couple of kids who got... how do I say this without getting demonetized? Unalived by a certain purple individual, and then reborn into the animatronics, creating a fate far fucking worse than death. The first game made for a mysterious story about children being murdered and stuffed into giant hunks of metal that haunted a pizzeria of all places. The second game, on the other hand, turned that story into something much bigger and far more enigmatic. I still don't fully get what happened in this game. I was too busy trying to deal with Balloon Boy. Let me use my lights, you fucking dope. Shit. Fuck. Shit. Fuck. The game introduced new mechanics as well, allowing for the security guard to pretend to be Freddy for an increment of time, somehow making the other animatronics believe that you are actually Freddy. Woo! The puppet was cool. She's challenging, but fair, and I would even argue one of the many things that were new at the time, but has since become a staple in FNAF, especially her story, which wrapped up beautifully before it happened. Overall, FNAF 2 is pretty good. It got a mixed reception at release, but I think it didn't hurt to have it in the series. The story was tolerable, the gameplay was new and challenging, a fresh change of pace from the original game, and the lore built up better than most other indie games that tried to replicate it at the time. But I think that this game is about as challenging as it gets. There is no need for Scott to make a FNAF game that was even more challenging than this game. I think we're gonna be A-okay. Aw, crap. Hey everyone, you just turned into part 1 of a 4-part retrospective on the critically acclaimed indie horror series Five Nights at Freddy's. Wow, that is some major dick riding. Don't worry, each part will be uploaded a day apart, so part 2 will be up tomorrow at noon Eastern time, but if you're terrible with dates, the video will be available to set a reminder for, so I'll have a link in the description for you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this so far. Make sure to like the video and subscribe, or else. Also, I have a free Patreon that anyone can join, so go do that. There's free extra content and everything. It's so cool. See you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.